All right, guys, let's keep it rolling with some quarterback conversation. 3 of the top 3 players in the class are all quarterbacks, so I want to go one by one. No surprises here. Arch Manning does sign with Texas. It was Texas the entire way. He is officially going to be a Longhorn. As you sit down and evaluate these quarterbacks, what is it about Arch Manning that propelled him to number 1?
Everything.
Everything.
I mean, I said when you look at his resume on our 5-star rankings release show, if his last name was Shane Falco from the replacements, we would still have him number 1. I mean, he is 6'4", 215 pounds. He can make the throws. He can move in the pocket. Didn't throw an interception until the state playoffs this year. A 34-2 touchdown to pass ratio, touchdown to interception ratio. Excuse me. People also knock him. Oh, he didn't do the Elite 11. Oh, he didn't go to this camp. He didn't play 7-on-7. Well, guess what? He's thrown for more passes than anyone else in the class of 2023 when it comes to top 247 quarterbacks. He's completed more passes than any top 247 quarterback in the class of 2023. He's got the resume, right? He's got the goods. That's why he's number 1 for us.
Yeah, Andrew, I think the big thing is that once you're at the top and once you're number 1, you start poking holes in a recruit's profile or his resume. And that was, I think, the biggest issue for Arch is that we weren't able to see him. No one was really able to see him in that competitive camp setting, at the showcases, at the Elite 11, where we saw the other quarterbacks. So I think that was the biggest wrinkle for him. But during the season, he backed it up, and he goes wire to wire as the number 1 prospect in this class among the quarterbacks.
Okay, so when you look at what this effect is on Texas, I know we like to joke, is Texas back? Are they going to be back? When are they going to be back? What does Arch Manning do for the trajectory of this Texas program?
Yeah, it's huge for Steve Sarkisian. It's huge for the recruiting efforts moving forward for that staff. And even if they don't sign or flip other guys in this class, it allows them to continue building in the 2024 group. Maybe if he doesn't start right away, if he's not in the mix until maybe year 2, year 3, you're still working on a lot of top prospects to potentially catch balls from Arch Manning. And that becomes a real big thing for Steve Sarkisian as he continues to sell the Longhorns, Andrew, on the recruiting trail.
Arch Manning is the most popular recruit ever. Okay, everyone knows the name ever.
Okay.
Think about it. Internet recruiting history. Everyone knows who Arch Manning is. Why? Because of the family bloodlines, okay? I think Arch Manning committing when he did allowed for Texas to assemble an awesome recruiting class. The guy next to him in the backfield is Cedric Baxter Jr., our number 2 ranked running back. Bajan Robinson's on the way out. I think Cedric Baxter can step in there and play right away. And when you look at the recruiting class rankings, right, Texas is sitting number 4 right now. Let me make sure on that. They're sitting refresh. They're number 4 right now, okay? That would be number 3 in the SEC. Okay, Texas moves to the SEC in 2024, okay? Alabama and Georgia are the 2 schools ahead of them. That's what Arch Manning does for you. The
Arch Manning effect. We will continue to talk about that Arch Manning effect. Hey, let's welcome back in our HQ audience. As a reminder, we are going strong 24/7 all day long on the 24/7 Sports YouTube page. So if you don't want to miss a moment of the conversation, join us there. Let's go back to these top 247 quarterback rankings. We've been discussing the Arch Manning effect. Our friend Andrew calling him the most impactful recruit. Of course, you know the last name. But Blair, when you talk about this Arch Manning effect, yes, you got him as your signal caller. You have him on the field. That itself will bring you some victories. But what does it do for other recruits who are thinking about Texas, thinking about some other programs, and then Arch Manning calls them and says, hey, you want to come join me here? How much does that have an effect on just the recruiting landscape as a whole, guys that want to follow him?
Yeah, I think a lot of recruits will understand that the spotlight will be on Texas. It'll be on Arch Manning. And who's going to be on the receiving end of a lot of those passes, a lot of those highlights, the clips that are being put out there. And it allows Texas to really sell that. It's going to be about building a core, building a group around Arch Manning that gives them the ability and the chance to actually bring Texas back. I know we joke about it all the time. I know Texas fans want the program to be up there and elevated to where it needs to be. And if you're heading into the SEC like they are, they're going to have to take up their recruiting another notch, even if they're fighting for top 5 classes. So Arch Manning gives them that boost heading into future classes.
TBD on if Texas is back, but our friend Steve Wiltfong is back. What can you tell us about the recruitment of Arch Manning?
Yeah, that was a battle that Texas was able to pull out over Alabama and Georgia. Clemson was also a contender for Arch Manning for much of the process, but ended up settling in on the 3 schools. And I just think the early relationship that he developed with Steve Sarkisian when he was at Alabama, and it translated to Texas. And Arch said something to me a couple weeks ago when I talked to him, that he was the only quarterback that Sarkisian offered, and I think that mattered to Arch at the end of the day. That was another inch in that recruitment. You never know when you start adding inches up which one's going to be the one that puts you over the top. He also loved the city of Austin. I think finding a college town, a place that he enjoyed being in, was something important to him. I also think he thought really highly of Athens, Georgia, and loved his time spent in Athens, but just loved being in Austin. Because I think in addition to wanting to maximize his college football potential, I think a great college experience was something that was actually very important to Arch Manning. So being in a college town like Austin was something that was super exciting to him. But then Sarkisian's offense, his track record as a play caller, his offense, Isidore Newman even had a couple Texas plays in their offense this year. So I think that the relationship with Sark, A.J. Milwee, Terry Joseph, the city of Austin, all of that led to him joining a program that's on the rise. He wants to help take them to the next level. He's recruiting guys like Deuce Robinson here down the stretch, and DeAndre Moore. DeAndre Moore is someone that Arch Manning's also trying to recruit.
Do you have some news on DeAndre Moore for us?
Yeah, I think the news on DeAndre Moore is that I still can't eliminate Louisville here. I think talking to a source around Louisville where DeAndre's committed, I think they feel good that they're going to keep DeAndre Moore in the fold. And then when you talk to sources around Texas, I think they feel good about where they stand with Moore and Tassili Akana. So there's going to be something's going to have to shake out here down the stretch, because I know they feel good about Tassili Akana around Norman as well.
Steve, Arch Manning, when I hear you talk about him, I get really excited, because he's the kind of recruit that not only goes in and plays well, he changed the culture for an entire program. Steve Sarkisian, by a lot of accounts, is the best quarterback coach in the country, one of the greatest offensive minds. You add Arch to that, guys want to play with Arch. Guys know that the spotlight is going to be on in Austin, Texas. That's a big move, and I think you're going to continue to see recruits jump in the boat for the Texas Longhorns because of the Arch Manning effect.
Carl, why do high school prospects come into the last day telling schools what they want to hear?
I think it's really hard for you to tell some of those guys no. I've been in situations with big-time recruits, and they've kind of known where they wanted to go to school, but it's really hard. Can you imagine telling Nick Saban no? Can you imagine saying no to Kirby Smart, Deion Sanders, guys like that? And so I think that kids have the best intentions, but they're not all equipped to deal with some of those adult conversations when it comes down to the end, and you have to start telling people that you're going to go somewhere else, especially with the relationships that you build over the recruiting process.
Hey, let's say Texas pulls this flip out. How fun would it be to see Arch Manning slinging it to DeAndre Moore?
Well, he's got to go in and beat out Quinn Ewers, right? So we can't just throw Quinn away yet. But
sure.
But I do think that we'll see Arch Manning pretty early in his freshman year.
They got Jonte Cook over there, too. He's a touchdown waiting to happen, one of the most explosive receivers in the country. Texas looking for a second straight top 5 recruiting class, getting dynamic players at the skill position. They have their next running back, Cedric Baxter, to come in and help fill the void that Bijan Robinson's going to leave. And then I just love the way that they're recruiting in the front 7 over these last 2 recruiting classes. If they can add Tassili Akana to that would be huge. And then the offensive line, best offensive line class in the country last year. They followed up with 5 more guys at average weight, 320 pounds. The beef is coming to Austin. They're going to be a big physical offensive line for years to come.
Hey, while we're on the topic of the impact young quarterbacks can have on these programs, what about Malachi Nelson to USC? What do you think he can do for the Trojans?
Well, I think right now the first thing that he can do to really help himself is learn the offense from Caleb Williams, and that's a great guy to have as an understudy. Lincoln Riley has proven 3 times can't be a fluke. He has consistently put out Heisman Trophy winning quarterback. So if he thinks that you're good enough to play quarterback for USC, I think special times are ahead for the Trojans. Another guy that guys are going to want to play for. If they can figure out how to come to the Midwest, the Big Ten imprint is going to be huge for them, coming to the Midwest and going after some of those big offensive and defensive linemen. If they can add that to their recruiting fold, it's going to be a special time again in LA.
When you look at the quarterbacks that are at the top of the NFL draft board, Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud, Will Levis, none of them were starters as a true freshman. It's okay to come into a program and sit in the hopper for a year like Malachi Nelson's going to sit and be able to play behind Caleb Williams. Needs to play on the field sporadically, and then when his number's called, Lincoln Riley's track record at the quarterback position is really second to none when you include the Heisman Trophy in addition to the draft picks, because Ryan Day's certainly at that same table.
Steve, I'm going to tell you what, a lot of times you're better off not playing as a freshman. You're better off learning and catching up with the speed of the game, getting used to having to go to class all over campus before you step out there and play. So it's like Steve said, it's not a bad thing if you don't start as a freshman. Keep your composure about you and keep working until you got the top spot.
Right. Sometimes you need some time to build that confidence. All right, Emily, let's go back to you.
Thank you, Grace. You heard Steve mention his conversation with Arch Manning. That was the first time he spoke since committing to Texas. Not a big, flashy guy when it comes to his recruitment. Meanwhile, Nico Imaliava has been at the center of a lot of great conversations. He is headed to Tennessee. The Vols, for the most part, pretty quiet day. Things stay in status quo. But what's so great about Nico, he's already in Knoxville, right? How much does this help him get a jump on potentially winning that starting job?
Well, they're going to need a quarterback in 2023. UT, Joe Milton is there. I think he's a 6th or 7th year senior, but we kind of think Nico has a chance to challenge for that quarterback one role, and he's going through bowl practices right now. He can't participate in the bowl game, obviously, but he's getting a crash course in the offensive system. And for us, I think the biggest thing with Nico is he's getting into a strength program. He's eating at a training table. This is a very lean individual, 6'5.5", probably like 170 pounds, 180 pounds. He needs to add some body armor. So that's the biggest thing I think about getting him in Knoxville right now, is getting him around that strength coach, adding that, getting used to that routine, because that's going to be huge in the spring over this next 6-7 months, him getting his body ready. But the talent, the potential, it's all there. He took a big step forward. This is a guy, we had a ton of conversation between who should be our number 2 quarterback, Dante More or Nico. We went with potential over production, and we stuck with Nico, and I think we feel confident with it.
Yeah, Andrew, to your point about his physical ability, right? This is a player who has all the tools. He has so much physical upside. I remember seeing him 2 years ago at a COVID showcase where, recruits in the state of California were trying to get attention, and this is a player who showed up, and he was known more as a volleyball player, really skinny, has taken tremendous strides as a football player, obviously has all the arm talent. But then you think about the recruiting potential and the recruiting impact that he could have. You touched on it, Emily, about Arch Manning's name, right? Being a recognizable, him being perhaps the most popular recruit ever. Nico Iamaleava had a ton of kids wearing pajamas all spring because of his brand, because of his name, because of just the ability for him to be a showcase player. And this is going to give Tennessee a chance to reach out on the West Coast and potentially reel in some big-time players. Tausili Akana being one of them. He was actually recruiting Nico was for such a long time. So it gives Tennessee that pull, that reach to be able to go to any region and pull in some prospects.
As a reminder, we will be going live to Tausili Akana later today at 4 o'clock for his commitment. We really have no idea where this is going to go, so excited to see what happens with him. All right, let's keep it rolling with the quarterbacks in Jackson Arnold. Andrew, you were looking at all the tape. I know we talked about the conversations that you've had. I mean, to be a fly on the wall when you guys are debating where they should be. What was the conversation surrounding Arnold?
Well, my guy Cooper is champion his rise in the rankings, and he finishes as a 5-star for us. And we got a lot of guys pretty high up in there, but Jackson Arnold, we think he's someone that could also see the field relatively early in his career. 14-1 this season, playing Texas 6A Division II football, 28-3 record as a starter at Denton Guire High School. I wouldn't consider him a run-first quarterback, but he can beat you with his legs. And we compared him to Taylor Heineke of the Washington Commanders, and we got some blowback from Sooners fans. I'm like, hey, this guy is starting in the NFL, but he's a creative guy in the pocket. He can make you miss on the run, and he can spray it to all different levels of the field. So Jackson Arnold, We are fans.
We go back to the summer and we're seeing some clips here of Jackson Arnold at the Elite 11 in Southern California. And Andrew, on day 3, the quarterbacks are scattered around on different fields there at Redondo Union High School in Redondo Beach, California. So they're not all looking at what all the other quarterbacks are doing. But in one of those stations, the name that kept being thrown out by some of the other quarterbacks was what Jackson Arnold was doing during the 7-on-7 portion, throwing to receivers, dicing up defenses, and putting up a ton of points. And that was a name that his peers were throwing out. So I think that's when we really started to see his stock rise.
What I love about the evaluation process, right, is my first live exposure to Jackson Arnold was Under Armour's Future 50 event, playing 7-on-7. I was tracking the stats. I think Jackson Arnold was like 3 of 15, right? I was like, man, like this guy is, but that's why it's a process. That was one data point for us. He goes out and has an excellent senior season in pads, looks the part at the Elite 11 finals a few weeks later. So he was a big riser for us. And again, in Jeff Levy's offense there in Norman, I think he's a guy that's going to be able to push it and go. You see him running right here. Again, he's not a run-first guy, but he can beat you to the corner, and he's creative. He's creative outside of the pocket in the open field. And again, he's been doing it against the best competition there in Texas.
You look at Oklahoma's quarterback room. Dillon Gabriel will return to the Sooners. What does that quarterback competition look like? I'll start with you. What's the likelihood that Jackson Arnold wins out the job?
Yeah, I think you would have to expect that Dillon Gabriel is still going to be the guy. I don't know if he would have came back if he wasn't going to be, or had maybe some promises that he would be able to have another year to lead that offense. But I think if you're an Oklahoma fan, you love that because it gives Jackson Arnold another year to learn the system, to figure out what he needs to work on, to learn under the tutelage of Dillon Gabriel and maybe maybe the intricacies of that offense. So if you're the Sooners and if you're a fan of Oklahoma, you love that you have an experienced starter like Dillon Gabriel back, and obviously it gives Jackson Arnold a chance to really bring in what he's going to bring in from his skill set.
We are talking quarterbacks here and taking a look at the top 247 quarterback rankings. My man Andrew Ivins has something to say. What do you have to give us here?
Well, actually, I think it applies to this entire group, right? We keep saying, we think he could be on the field in 2023, and I know you guys watch college football. I know you watch the NFL. This time of the year, I like to remind people, you're only as good as the number 2 quarterback in your room, or maybe even the number 3 quarterback. I mean, how many backups have played at premier blue blood college football programs, and how many of them are doing it at for these NFL teams this time of the year? So when you look at a guy like Jackson Arnold, hey, it's honestly a perfect situation for Oklahoma with Dillon Gabriel being there. He's kind of the bridge quarterback, and then Jackson Arnold, you can groom him along just like they did with Cade Klubnik there at Clemson.
All right, guys. Once again, welcome back to our CBS Sports HQ audience. If you don't want to miss a moment, please join us on the 24/7 Sports YouTube page. For now, we're going to send it over to Josh Pate. Hello.
Greetings, ma'am. I got to tag along to Elite 11 this past year. Somehow that got past management, and I got to actually see some of these guys with you guys live out in Cali. I am very interested when we get to this time of year. There's no more film that comes out on guys. You may see him at an all-star game, but you've seen him throw in person so many times. You don't hear opinions radically change. Maybe once upon a time you did. That doesn't necessarily happen as much anymore. So I want to go through some of these guys really quick, and I just want to ask you, Cooper Pategna, the ones that stand out, fill in that blank, and then second blank, why specifically do they stand out?
Well, I think starting with a guy that's been a riser in our top 247 rankings as of recent, that is Lincoln Kindholz, committed to Ohio State in Ryan Day. This is a guy from Pierre, South Dakota. Shout out to them, 14,000 people population. This is a guy, 3-sport athlete, a guy that gets it done not only on the gridiron but on the diamond as well. Looking at the statistics here for a guy like this, 6'3", 185 pounds, 19 points a game, Josh, 7 rebounds. Also hits .472, 6 home runs, and a guy that has a 1.24 ERA. And we always talk about the multi-sport background. I thought this was a really fascinating pickup for Ohio State. You get a guy that's also a dynamic runner as well, and a guy that also had 46 touchdowns in his career playing in the state of South Dakota, 3,500 yards rushing as well. And the biggest thing for me when it comes to Lincoln Kindholz, his completion percentage from his junior to his senior season jumped 12 points from 55% to 67%. this is a really interesting spot for Lincoln Kindholes to end up. I like him there. Another guy that stands out to me, Kenny Minchie. You know, I've talked a lot about Notre Dame in this process and their need to go out and get one of the better arms in the country. And they did that with Kenny Minchie, even though he's on the back end of the top 247 for us and sitting right there in the middle and top 160 player. Banged up a little bit this year, only played 4 games, had an injury to his shoulder, but a guy that was playing really well as a senior and had a great year as a junior. So diamond in the rough, I think Kenny Minchie in terms of the guy that you got to keep an eye on here late, Lincoln Kindholes.
It's interesting. We're talking about Kansas State now in the context of being a Big 12 champion. They were right on the cusp of a college football playoff team this year, and you may think to yourself, yeah, but that won't last because they can't recruit at that level. Well, I'm sitting here looking at Avery Johnson right now. Currently number 8 in the overall quarterback rankings, but if you're looking at a specific skill set, like you're smiling already, like you know we're about to end the show and you're about to go get some food. What excites you about Avery Johnson?
I love this kid, man. He's a freak, and I love being around the kid. I saw him at the Elite 11 Regionals in Nashville. He carries himself exceptionally well. Another dual sport athlete, a guy that played on the hardwood, averaged over 13 points a game, and then you get to see him move around a little bit. Had over 1,000 yards rushing as a junior, over 800 yards this year as a senior, and another guy you want to see these numbers inflate later on in their career. To me, he took a big jump as a passer from his junior to his senior season, went 12-1 at Mays High School in Kansas, and I think what they're bringing in Avery Johnson in the Little Apple in Manhattan, this guy is super dynamic. I would not be surprised to see him on the field early.
They were talking about Nico there. I want to talk one more time about Nico, because if you were to have to do what we always love to do, and I were to just project 1, 2, or 3 years down the road and tell you, hey, I guarantee you one of these dudes is winning a Heisman, who do you look at and why?
And this would be it. You know, Andrew talked about projection over production. You know, when you look at Nico Iamaleava's resume, this is a guy that only played 23 games. He was 20-3. He had under a 60% completion rate. You might be sitting there, how in the heck do you have this guy as the number 2 quarterback in the country? He can do some things at the position that other players can't do. That's what it comes down to. You're talking about a guy 6'5", 180 pounds. He moves differently in the pocket. I think his pocket savviness is very similar to a guy like Bryce Young, and that's a little bit of Nico Imaliava's magic. He's very comfortable playing off platform as well. So he is a wow type of player. He just needs to be a little bit more consistent. I love the fact that he's early enrolling in Knoxville. I think this is a guy that is a beautiful fit in Josh Heupel's system. I'm going to say it right now, in December, Josh, when you start to look at Tennessee's schedule, the first couple of games, UVA in Nashville, Austin Peay, and then they go to Florida, Texas, San Antonio, really difficult non-conference game. And then you got South Carolina and then a bye game. And then the next 3 games, A&M, at Bama, at Kentucky. You might be wondering, why am I talking about that right now? I would not be surprised after that bye week if we're talking about Nico Iamaleava being the guy. And I think that is somewhat circumstantial with what you have in that room already in Joe Milton. But if we don't see consistency in Joe Milton as a passer, Nico Iamaleava is too good of a fit, too talented to keep off the field.
It's going to be him. Boom, it's going to be him at some point this year. The transfer portal is also something we have to talk about, sort of in conjunction with these guys that we're talking about today. Leary's gone to Kentucky now. Grayson McCall's still in there, and I know there's a lot of talk about where he may end up and how he may end up there. Hudson Card's still in the portal. When you look at this list in front of us, DJ's still there. We have to talk about him, Shedeur Sanders. What does that list of names mean to you?
A lot of good quality talent still on the market. You know, Grayson McCall, one of those guys right now that played at Coastal Carolina in a Group of 5 program, but it has as many reps as any other starting quarterback in the country. So Devin Leary, huge pickup. I love the fit. Liam Cohen coming back over from the Los Angeles Rams. I think that fit is really good for him and a guy that's going to play on Sundays. This market right now, I mean, you have a little bit of everything you want there. Hudson Card, a highly touted guy coming out, a little bit of a dual threat, can give you something on the ground. And Brennan Armstrong, Luke Altmaier, we haven't even really talked about these guys a little bit. Malik Hornsby still looking for a home. That's the beauty to me of the transfer portal right now. If you're a quarterback needy team that has aspirations of making a deep run, you can go out and still find your guy in the middle of December.
There's a guy down there, 2, 4, 6, a 10th name on the list is a multi-year starter at a program up until the midway point of this year, has been a contender every year, and that's Spencer Sanders from Oklahoma State. And he's just kind of sitting there. And I always wonder where those guys are going to land, because in this era, transfer portal era, I want you to think about what we just watched happen in Knoxville, Tennessee this year. We watched Hendon Hooker. Hendon Hooker wasn't an enigma. Everyone knew of him. At least if you're a hardcore college football fan, you knew, oh, that's that kid they got from Virginia Tech, right? And he comes in, and you probably, to varying degrees, thought sort of highly of him, but no one thought he was going to end up having the year he had this year 2 or 3 years ago. But it just goes to speak to what fit means in this game. This day and age, it's always been like that, but only recently have we seen guys get established one place and then en masse, as you just saw with that list, just up and move elsewhere. And so what you could have is you could have a multi-year starter, for example, Devin Leary now at Kentucky, for example, Spencer Sanders, fill in the blank, where they go and they drop themselves into a new position, a new home, and everyone wants to, find lightning in a bottle. But if you do, you can actually do what Hendon Hooker just did. If you end up being married in the right system with the right head coach, right offensive coordinator, right collection of skill around you, there's some guys that have been cast off as average to above average in the college football public's mind that could end up really being a difference maker on a contending team next year.
Well, you said it. It's the F word. It's about fit. The coaches will tell you that all across the country. And listen, sometimes it takes a coach to see something in a player that maybe another staff didn't see. So I think we've seen plenty of examples of that over the last couple of years, even going back to Joe Burrow. I know we didn't see a lot of them at Ohio State, but he goes to a perfect situation surrounding cast there. Yeah, he's the #1 pick in the draft, but in terms of who he's linked up with, and a guy like Joe Brady, they're able to put together arguably the best offense of all time in 2019. We've seen that with Hendon Hooker. It's just kind of an afterthought. All of a sudden, he links up with Josh Heupel, and they're making beautiful music together. That's going to happen again this year. Maybe we just don't know who that is.
All right, our friends on HQ, we're going to toss you now to a quick break. Plenty more quarterback talk coming up on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. And now, Miss Emily, we toss it back to you in the studio.
All right, we're sticking with the quarterback talk. We saw the transfer rankings. We've already seen a lot of movement when it comes to the quarterback position and transfers. Who's a guy that we didn't show on that list that you're keeping your eye on?
Graham Mertz, right? Reportedly, the former Wisconsin quarterback, started 32 games over a long time. It sounds like he's headed to Florida, which is interesting. Michael Pratt, Tulane's starting quarterback. There was a lot of buzz, a lot of talk in my circles, scouting circles, both the recruiting circles, that Michael Pratt was going to enter the transfer portal. He announces last night he's coming back to Tulane for the 2023 season. Going to play for Fritz there. Obviously, they've had a great year. So what we talk about chain reactions. Next thing we know, Graham Mertz, he's announced, or it sounds like he's headed to Florida. Florida needs a quarterback. They're losing Anthony Richardson, right? That room is very small. So Graham Mertz is going to be the guy. I think it's an interesting fit. I mean, Mertz, 38 touchdowns to 26 interceptions there in Camp Randall. I mean, it's not been the best of runs, but Florida needs an arm, and more importantly, they need an arm that can show up in the spring. Mertz, he visited last weekend. We saw that through his Instagram. I think someone found his IG story, so he's going to show up. But I want to know if Florida's going to go after another portal quarterback arm, because I'm not sure he's quarterback 1 for them. I think he's more maybe QB2.
Yeah, as evident by their performance in the bowl game, quarterback definitely a necessity there. But what about the 5-star quarterback they have entering this year, and Jaden Rashada? What can you tell them about him?
Yeah, Graham Mertz, obviously a great placeholder for next season, but then after that, Jaden Rashada arrives on campus. Then you think about 2024 with DJ Lagway, the 5-star composite quarterback, who's also committed to the Gators. So you have to like what Billy Napier is building in that quarterback room. In terms of Rashada specifically, I find it hard to find another quarterback in this 2023 class that is as self-motivated as he is. Emily, I went to see them, Pittsburgh High School, down in San Diego, early September. This is a player who, out of halftime, came out on the field, was walking and pacing up the sideline and speaking to himself. And he was saying, "You're the top quarterback in the country, number 5. You're the top 5. You're the top quarterback in the country." So he is a player who believes in himself. Whenever you see him at a camp or at a showcase, he's going and asking questions and really taking things serious. So I think you have to really like what Florida has built in that quarterback room in the future, and Graham Mertz obviously adds to that.
And you looked extensively at Jaden Rashada. We mentioned on the show, and we will continue about the fun dynamic happening in the Sunshine State. He was a flip from Miami earlier on in the cycle. What does that quarterback room look like in terms of competition between now Mertz coming in and Jaden Rashada? Nobody's guaranteed the starting job there.
It's funny because a few months ago I wrote, or after they flipped Rashada, I loved what Billy Napier had done. He had turned around that quarterback room. I mean, you had Marcus Stokes was committed, you had Jaden Rashada who was committed. They also felt good about Jalen Kitna. Well, two of those guys are no longer there. So it is going to set up interesting in terms of competition. I want to know if they try to add one more portal arm. I think we saw the Jack Miller experiment, and Blair, I saw him play in high school. I was not surprised that it didn't go too well there in Las Vegas. I don't think they can roll into the season thinking Jack Miller versus Graham Mertz. Ideally, maybe Jaden Rashada can come in and push that along, but let's also not forget, Florida wants to run the football. Like, that's what Billy Napier wants to do with that offensive line. So really, I think they need a game manager, a guy that's going to limit mistakes. I don't know if Jaden Rashada, true freshman quarterbacks, maybe it is Graham Mertz.
I mean, if they do want to run the football, it isn't like they would be giving Jaden Rashada a ton of responsibility, right? And I think he's a very cerebral quarterback, a player that really, I think, understands and can play to his capabilities. You go out to Pittsburgh High School and you see his offensive line, and he's not surrounded by 5 stars. He's not a player who's been protected, so he's kind of been running for his life back there. And I don't want to throw Pittsburgh High School's offensive line under the bus, but this was a player who made it to a state championship game, but I think was sacked nearly double-digit times. So this is a player who's going to get to Gainesville, that raised up level of competition, but also a raised level of talent around him is going to make him better. So I would not count him out in the competition at Florida right away because he's that special. He's a 5-star for a reason.
Excited to see what happens in the quarterback room in Florida as Billy Napier works to turn that program around.